Welcome, everyone. Our special guest is Clarissa Bitar, who is a Palestinian Oud musician and composer born and raised based in Los Angeles, California. She graduated from UC Santa Barbara with a degree in music and an emphasis in ethnomusicology. As a student, Clarissa won multiple awards for excellence in performance in ethnomusicology and had the privilege of playing around California with the UC Santa Barbara Middle East Ensemble. To further her studies, Clarissa sought and learned from prominent Arab Oudis, including Simon Shaheen, Shalbul Rouhana, and Bassem Saba, Allah yarhamu. Clarissa, welcome to Quartertones.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm really honored that you're here. And I kind of want to start with asking you about where you are right now physically.
Well, physically, I'm in my studio in my house, which is in the Los Angeles area. I'm pretty lucky that my family let me convert their garage into a studio. And so I have like this very beautiful big space that I can work in and that can be as loud as I need to be. And yeah, it's a nice little space I have here.
So what does it feel like to be sort of playing and studying and having studied more sort of classical Arab music in many cases in the center of music production, contemporary music production, and sort of being oriented in that place, surrounded by tons of musicians who are interested in sort of producing and publishing and exploring contemporary music. Well, so like how does that sort of all meld together in your brain?
Yeah, that's a position I find myself often in. And there's a lot of artists, like you said, in Los Angeles that want to do collaborations and more recently, a lot of artists who are Arab or who have, Arab heritage that they want to be, kind of giving a nod to. And so a lot of times the basis of the music will just be like, Western pop or like hip hop or whatever it might be. But then when they want to bring in that little flair for us, it's by like calling me and having me put some Oud lines in a lot of times. And it's been interesting to see those two sides and like work with I've had like the privilege of working with a lot of different type of artists and in a lot of different genres, which has been cool because it kind of stretches, where you think the instrument can be. I obviously I grew up like doing very classical stuff. And like, I still really appreciate a lot of the classical stuff, but a lot of the stuff now that people want to be incorporating, it's a different form. It has like a different life in it, and it's got it's a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy that aspect of it. It's definitely been something that's kind of pushed my brain to different directions. And you always have people that hear this instrument, they want it for loops and they want it for all types of things. It can be used in a lot of different ways, and for film and stuff too, scoring. Obviously, when you score with this type of stuff, it has a very specific image that it evokes automatically. Yeah. But still, it's been, I find myself in a lot of different spaces, like wearing a lot of different hats because of that. So it's something I actually enjoy.
So I wanted to ask you about this. When did you first start playing Oud?
I started playing Oud when I was 18, actually. So kind of late. It was when I went to UC Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
That I had the opportunity. Yeah.
So what did you play before then? Because I want to understand the sort of the lily pads that got there.
Yeah, I grew up as a guitarist. So I've been playing guitar since I was 10. And it was like a real, passion of mine playing guitar growing up. A lot of times I tried to play Arabic songs, like play along, and I didn't understand that there were frets that kind of like limited the amount of notes that I could actually play for Arabic music. And so it wasn't until I started studying Oud that, you start applying different things and connecting the dots here and there. And like, obviously muscle memory was a huge, it was a huge help that I had muscle memory on the guitar to be able to like, how to press down with your hand and stuff like that. Basic things. There are some obviously like, differences. And then of course, growing up with the music as well, like constantly like made it, I think, an easier bridge, like easier gap to bridge in some ways, because I had like been pre-exposed to it, like growing up the music all the time. And then I was also a guitar player. So.
Yeah. All right. So I have a couple questions about your sort of musical upbringing before we get to some of the music. I know that you've done a bunch of collaborations in sort of the hip hop and R&B and rap space. Do you roll your eyes when you hear sort of like 1990, early 2000 Arab samples and sort of Fat Joe and Jay-Z songs? Are you like, oh my God, another one of da 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 da?
Yeah, it's a small window that they used of like sound samples that is used to evoke, right, that
Correct.
the sound of the Middle East. And so it's just like, it becomes for someone that understands like the wide range of like scales and things that we actually have access to, and then what gets like filtered down and like consumed by, a lot of times by the West, is just like a very small select amount. So it can kind of become like, oh my gosh, not this again,
Mm-hmm.
But also it can be frustrating because sometimes that's literally people's only reference to it, and they'll be like, oh yeah, like what's up in JC, like Big Pimpin' or something, like that's like their only reference sometimes. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually from this song. And so, it can be interesting at times, for sure. I kind of roll my eyes at times, definitely. I mean, not that it's some of the stuff doesn't sound great, but it's just that like, it becomes kind of too much of the same stuff.
So tell us a little bit about this EP that we have on the screen, and give us some sort of context, what people can expect to hear later on in this conversation, but also if they queue you up on YouTube or on Spotify or on Apple Music, what do they find?
Yeah, this is a really special EP to me. It was the first one I worked on, and it was with Mohammad Kurd, the poet. And he definitely, he's got such incredible poetry that I would just sit with the poems, and we actually made it in this room, this same studio. And so he came over and we sat down. It was, a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2018.
For those who can't see the screen, so this is 2019, Belly Dancing on Wounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so he was talking about the title. He was mentioning how so much of the music that we have in Arabic music is so upbeat and dancey. And then if you look at the words, actually, a lot of it's very depressing and like very sad, and there's this very like clear juxtaposition between the music and the words. And so we kind of wanted to play on that a little bit, because a lot of the poetry in here is very personal and it's very heavy poetry. And we wanted to, create a music for it that kind of like that spoke to that juxtaposition. And so this project was actually really, it didn't hit me actually listening to it, like how special it was to me to make, until I listened to it in Palestine. Mm-hmm. And, because he in the poetry he describes a lot of like, things about his daily life and things about driving the bus and things that when I was sitting in Palestine, listening to the poetry, just had brought a lot of different levels of meaning to me to the poetry. And so this is definitely a very special project to me.
Walk me through the composition process. So it's, you sat down over the course of a sort of a month, he was in town, and you're like, all right, come over, let's put this together. Or is it sort of a single session are you trading voice notes over the course of a year? How does it sort of go together?
Yeah, he came over for, I think, 2 weeks or something like that. And we just locked ourselves in here. He had some poems that he already wrote, and then other poems that he freestyled, like parts on the spot, and then, became part of it. And it was just a very it just flowed so naturally because he was being inspired by the music and like ideas of things. And then I was like so inspired by his work and the words, and it was giving me also ideas as well. So we kind of just sat through and we recorded a lot of his poetry in audio tracks. And then we would sit down together and like produce music around those tracks. And a lot of times, we'd we do it the other way where we produce music and be like, okay, this has to be for this poem. And then he'd record the poem over it. So it really depended, but it was very like a very collaborative process between the both of us. You know, we were just sitting in the room together, exchanging ideas and trading ideas. And then that's what we came up with. So it was a really fun project to me.
And I was low-key expecting us to do the Zoom session from that bathroom.
This is literally it's so funny because, you know, we were recording, and at the time, the acoustics in the bathroom were just awesome. Like the tiles and everything, we're just like, you know what, let's bring some of the stuff in the bathroom. But so we were in the bathroom, and then we had a picture of us, and the artist who did the drawing is actually Jumana from Watan, Palestine. And she saw that picture and she's like, this is it. And then she added the cats, of course, which I love. She put our cat and she put her cat. And I was like, it was just awesome. The way it came together. It's really one of my favorite album covers.
It's not the first, and it won't be the last time an album is recorded in a bathroom.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Okay, so let's get to the music. I feel like you're teed up enough. So tell us a little bit about the verse interlude that you're going to be playing. Just cue it up a little bit, then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, I'm going to play Taqasim, which is an instrumental improvisation, and I'm going to do it in maqam nahawand. That's going to be the maqam I'm going to start with, and I'm going to modulate as well to other maqamat during the Taqasim, and I'll eventually return back to nahawand. And that's something that's just like a big part of the Oud tradition, a big part of the instrumentalist tradition in Arab music. So I'm excited to do that one.
Cool. So I'm going to mute myself, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you.
Beautiful, absolutely stunning. So I have a bunch of questions. If you keep the instrument in your hand, I have a bunch of questions for you.
Okay.
So, can you just give us some basic terminology? When you're going like da, 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 when you're like going back and forth between some of the lower strings and some of the higher strings, using the lower strings as sort of this common refrain to sort of root or sort of root the sort of improvisation that you're doing. What is that called?
So you mean this technique?
Correct.
Yeah, this is called an upper pedal. So people call it an upper pedal, and basically you're pedaling one note and you're at the same time hitting other notes. And it's a really common oud technique. It's very much like one of the accents of the oud, you know. So it's a very common practice. You hear it a lot in a lot of improvisations and stuff like that.
And is there a specific moment in the theme that you're supposed to include? That is there even are there rules that you're trying to follow, or are you really sort of letting yourself sort of float?
It's a tough question, right? Because, you know, it is an improvisation. So I am doing it, you know, you do want to in some ways plan your improvisation as it's going on, because that moment is considered a very like hype moment, right? And so you kind of want to, it's you know, the way it look, you have to think of it like a roller coaster. You want that last drop to kind of be at the end, usually as to feel some sense of closure, right? That being said, that's not always the case that this is done at the end, you know, and it's not, you know, has to be done at the end as like an ending kafla or like, you know, tail closing. It doesn't have to be like that. I've seen it done in the middle, and I've seen, you know, people do the taqasim where they want to bring it right back down to a different vibe and then go up for another section where they do something else. So it really depends. But even though it's improvisation, there are, of course, conventions, right? Like in the same way that we're improvising this conversation, we're both using English so we can understand each other. And there's still those conventions that still happen in an improvisation that make it understandable for people to say, oh yeah, that's a nahwan taqasim, right?
Yeah. So one of the things, you know, this idea of seeing these pieces, right, that you're going through, how do you sort of, or how did you, as you were playing that, think through the end of sort of one phrase and then one section as you move into a new maqam? Are there sort of transitions that you're just used to making, or the transitions that you feel most comfortable with? And what did you just play? How many maqamat did you use?
Right there, I used Nahawand, I did some Bayati, I did some Hijaz, some Saba, and some Ajam. So
do each of them in your mind have a specific color or a specific flavor or a specific emotion, or like how do you even
definitely an emotion for me,
okay,
for sure, and just a vibe, you know. For me, Nahawand is very like serious and heavy, and it feels very contemplative. And
can you play each one real quick?
Yes,
sort of walk through them.
So Nahawand is what you could say is equivalent to kind of like a minor scale, but it has a little bit of conventions. Right, that's Nahawand. Then we have Ajam, which is kind of like the more bright major component.
Yeah, right? That's almost exactly a major scale.
Exactly. Okay. But then we've got Hijaz. Augmented second.
Yeah, that's like a harmonic key minor.
Exactly.
Like shifted. Yeah.
And then we've got Bayati, which is uses that half flat. So the very like, you know, typical Farid al-Atrash taqasim. Bayati.
Are you making references in your head? Is it like like jazz players are like constantly referencing, or hip hop rhymers, right, are like constantly referencing other rhymes.
Yeah. We're big thieves. I mean,
Yeah,
no, but yeah, like it's really and truly, every time I'm listening to something, I'm like, oh, what was that? I'm going to save, I'm going to store that one for later. And so you're always kind of, I mean, anything that you've heard has probably been played before and it's into some capacity, right? So you're always trying to take ideas and like melt ideas together and repackage them and transform them in different ways. A lot of my compositions actually were just, parts of songs that I just loved so much. And I like took them and I, made something different from them and you rework it. And so it is like a huge part of the tradition, I mean, that's why I tell people I teach, I'm like, if you play for, 2 hours a day or an hour a day, you should be listening for like 3 hours of the day or like, adding that up, because that's really, you're subconsciously downloading a lot of that stuff in your brain and you're absorbing a lot, more than you think.
Yeah. My favorite thing in hip hop is finding the original that one of my favorite rappers was referencing. Like hearing some like, I don't know, hearing some like KRS-One line and be like, oh, that's where Lupe got that. Oh, interesting,
Yeah,
Oh,
I do
cool.
the same thing. I do literally do the same thing when I'm listening to somebody's Taqasim and I'll be like, I know you got that from this Fadil Atrash song. Like, I know, like, I know where they're pulling it from. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to the second one. Let's talk about what is this interlude and why did you pick it before we go into it?
This is from my latest album, which is called Hasan Sabi. And I titled this one Al-Mizan after my partner, because she's a Libra. So I made this song for her. And she loves Debke. And I wanted it to have kind of just like these, not really like the new Debke, but this old school heavy like Debke kind of vibe. Like you'll see it when I play the song. But yeah, it's a song I made for her.
Amazing. Okay, take it away. Amazing.
Thank you.
So what are you sort of feeling as you play that?
This one just feels very powerful to me. It's like I wanted it to feel like a powerful opening. And it's I wanted it to feel just like a strength in it, because my partner's just such a strong person in my life, and she really like provides me with a lot of strength as well. Like she's like literally my number one supporter. So I wanted this song to be just feel like powerful and, have that energy to it as well. And it's the first one on the album. So I wanted to, kind of open up with like a good start. So
how did you compose the rest of the music? Is it a collaborative process? Are you doing it on on GarageBand or Pro Tools, or what are you doing it on?
I'm doing it on Logic. I have, a lot of synths. I have programs and stuff like that. And so I produce sometimes I produce, a beat or something like that before I put down the Oud line. And then I'll just sit there, listen to it. I'm like, oh, I know exactly what I can do with the Oud on this. And so I kind of will just, build up a project, add instruments here or there until I feel that I've got like a solid base. And then I'll lay some Oud lines over it and see how it sounds. But that's definitely how this one was composed.
Are you thinking of, it's interesting, like, okay, so here's a question for you. Are you thinking of these as songs? Or I know that sounds like a stupid question.
No, it's not a stupid question. I know. I think of them as moods, if that's weird to think about. You know what I mean? To me, they're very much moods. And I know that a song can be a mood and it can, be this gray area, but obviously they're instrumental. And so to me, it's not the type of music that you're listening, obviously, to sing along to, or, maybe even to like dance to, but it's very much, I've heard from people that like, wow, like I like to listen to music when I'm trying to focus or when I'm trying to do work or when, I want to feel like, or I'm feeling sad or something, it can be a lot of, I think that's how I kind of described them as like a collection of moods for me. And each mood, like each song on that album is kind of like a love letter to different people in my life, whether it's like, my partner or to my grandparents or to myself or my family. So a lot of those have their own mood to them as well, which is kind of like what I go for, I think, when I'm composing.
Yeah. Who are you listening to when you're putting this together? This album more broadly, are you listening to like would I be surprised by the array of stuff you're listening to? Are you listening to?
Yeah, you probably would be. I listen to a ton of stuff, honestly. Like, we've just been, me and my sister, listening to Summer Walker's new album and R&B stuff, but also I listen to a lot of, like, of course, classical R&B music a lot. With my family, we listen to it all the time, but a lot of, hip hop, a lot of rap, a lot of also, like Spanish music. Like my family loves the Gypsy Kings. Like, there's a lot of just I think a collection of, musical influences that are around that I kind of draw from. So it's hard to say like if there's one thing that I listen to. There's really not, and I feel that I have to kind of live in a lot of different worlds too. It's like I want to listen to a lot of like R&B and pop and hip hop and stuff, so that when I'm like in the studio working with artists that, I feel like I've got a good grasp on the music.
So like this track, for example, where you think to yourself, man, I want some like Love Lockdown drums behind me.
Yeah, for this one, I was just imagining, like I had this image in my head while I was composing it of her doing Debkit. Right. Okay. And so like a lot of the stomping and that drumming was me just visualizing her feet on the ground, like stomping, like she loves doing that like all the time. So, and I just like, it was watching her do it. And I'm like, this is like what I'm imagining is like these drums and these hits. And so it had like a very visual, like representation in my mind and what I was like putting out, if that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Let's do the third one. Let's pull this up. So tell us a little bit about the background for this track, what it's called, and why you chose it.
Yeah, this one, I had this melody composed. I just it was in my head all the time. I would just be humming it. And it was just driving me nuts sometimes, when you can't get a melody out of your head, this was this melody. And it was just always playing in my mind. And I was with my cousin who was visiting from Bethlehem. And he was sitting with me and he grabbed the drum. He started playing like the drums along with it. I was like, wow, this sounds actually really good. I like how this sounds. And he's playing the melody, the rhythm along with it. And so I'm like, this should be a song, and we sat down and recorded it. And then I'm like, what should I call this? And I'm like, it feels like we're sitting, outside, like under some trees, just like waiting for a barbecue to happen. Like, it just felt like that. And so he's like, yeah, you should call it Bayara. Because a Bayara is like, it's got that vibe. It's like the piece of land that you go do those things at. You sit down and you have a barbecue and you chill outside. So that's very much the vibe, or like that I was trying to evoke from this song, or that I felt it evoked when I like actually like fleshed it out. And so I was like, yeah, this fits. And that's how I came up with it.
Amazing. So let's listen to a little bit of it. Go for it. Oh, you had me drumming away. Okay, amazing. So how long does it take to record something like that and to write something like that in your head? Like, can you actually, before you answer that question, let me ask you a better first question. You said the melody was stuck in your head. Play the melody that was stuck in your head in its first iteration.
Yeah, it was like this.
And you sing that. It's not like you play it first and then it gets stuck. The earworm starts in your head.
Yeah, I was listening to this song. I think it's Kulthum Oud and Its, and they have this little like section in it that has this like, it's just this little tiny, like, I can't tell you, 3 notes that were just like got stuck in my head when I was listening to it. And then my brain kind of morphed it into something else. And then that got stuck in my head. So then I sat down and kind of fleshed it out. And then, that's what we came up with.
So if I can ask, what maqam is that?
That's in Kurd, maqam Kurd. So Kurd, kind of like equivalent to like the Phrygian, you can say. Yeah. Okay,
so when you're sitting there playing that, do your other muscles ever reach for a different guitar, a different instrument? Are you ever like, I just want to play this on the guitar first, and I want to sort of see this in that mode?
I do that all the time. Yeah, I often will like come up with an idea on the oud, and because like you have kind of a different, at least my brain composes different depending on which instrument I'm using.
For sure.
You know? So different things come up. And so sometimes it's like, let me try this thing that I came up with on the oud on the guitar, or let me try this idea that I came up with on the guitar on the oud. And I'm always trying to go back and forth, or even on the piano, like when I can play on the piano, it's something different. So I'm always going back and forth between the, different instruments and trying to see like how I can collaborate between all, because it feels like you put on, you wear like a different for each one. It's crazy.
Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah, no worries.
Do you have a guitar in tune next to you somewhere?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious to see what that sounds like when you like work through that melody on the guitar.
Yeah, it's funny too because my guitar playing definitely.
Are you playing like Dick Dale?
Right, yeah, like my guitar playing definitely became more melodic than harmonic after playing Oud,
For sure.
Okay. So. So yeah, see, I get the scale, I'll figure it out.
So like, but does that process, the reason why I wanted to ask you to do that, and thank you so much for being willing to do that. The reason why is because as you're doing that, do new ideas sort of emerge and new sounds emerge and like, oh, that's interesting. And because there are different shapes and there are different restrictions.
Totally. Yeah. Like, different patterns even, like, a lot of times when you're composing, you're thinking about patterns, like actually like in a very weirdly mathematical way, like, and I wonder if you do it like this and the guitar brings out, a completely different pattern for you to work with. And so then you're trying new ideas and you're like, oh, let me try from this interval to here in a way that you might not have tried on the oud, So definitely.
So I'm so glad that you brought up the sort of melodic versus harmonic. When you start playing something like that, you layer it into Logic. Are you ever tempted to be like, oh, what would a major 7 sound like?
Yeah, I do. I actually have songs, I have songs where I have chords behind me. And
really?
I have a couple of songs. Like if you look at a song like on the album, it's called Ala Rahtik. They actually, it's in C minor, Nahawand, right? And so because it's in that minor, I can add chords. And so I have chords playing behind me. And you are curious sometimes, okay, how can I stretch that? I've even had chords played like on something with a half flat where I kind of just like omit like certain notes so that I can just, fill out some space. So yeah, like some of like before I actually got this program called Fluid Pitch, I would do that a lot, where like I wouldn't have all the notes on my keyboard. And so like I would have to just omit, like use chords and omit certain notes that were actually like just in the scale. So I mess around with it a lot actually. And there's a lot of people that are doing it, like one of my teachers, Sharbel Rahana, he does it a lot where like, he doesn't care whatever half flats in the song, he'll put chords behind it and make something of it. It actually sounds pretty cool sometimes. So it can happen, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to our quick Q&A. And then I'm sure there will be questions in the chat and I have some more questions for you too. Okay. First question. I'm going to change this question. So what are you listening to right now that may surprise me?
Well, that may surprise you. I don't know if this will surprise you that I was listening to. Well, we've been listening to a lot of Al-Mizan for Abd al-Halim because just everybody in the family's been on that song lately. We've just been hearing it all over. Like I don't know.
I love the communal listening.
Yeah,
invite me over for one of these family listening events.
Yeah, it's always a show here. Definitely, I live next door to my grandmother, and so and my uncles next door as well. So I mean, there's always just a huge amount of family around, and everyone loves music. So it's just like a pastime. Everyone will listen together. But definitely been a lot of Abd al-Halim. And I've been listening to a lot of Salatin al-Tarab. I don't know if you know Salatin al-Tarab, but they just do like mawawil and stuff like that. They sing a lot of like Hudud Halabi, a lot of like Sabah Fakhri's type stuff. So yeah, I've just been a lot of that. And then Summer Walker's new album, actually, we've been listening to that a lot as well. It just came out, but my sister and I have been enjoying that. And what else?
Cool.
Yeah. think that's
Do
about
you
it.
play covers immediately? You listen to Summer Walker, and are you immediately like, oh my God, I got to learn this song?
Yeah, my sister, she gets so annoyed by me sometimes because we'll be
I do
listening
that
to.
immediately. I have to
Yeah.
learn a song.
I literally just start grabbing my instrument and I'll play along and I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. And it gives me ideas, I swear. One time I was listening to Meg the Stallion and Giselle was like my sister was playing Meg the Stallion. I'm like, okay. And I grabbed my oud and I was playing along with them. I'm like, oh, this would make a really cool loop. And then I recorded that and made a song out of it. So it happens in like the most random of ways. You
Yeah.
can't really predict it.
Okay. All right, before the next question, I have to ask you, what's the ratio of songs you keep to songs you throw?
Yeah, I have like hundreds.
Yeah.
Hundreds of songs that I have not released. They sit there like I'm horrible about naming my tracks. Like I'm very bad about album. Like C minor idea Monday. It's like how is that ever gonna have like any reflection for me? Like how am I gonna remember what that is? So I sometimes go through, all the the list of files, and then sometimes I'm like I'll rediscover one. But definitely from the amount that I've put out and the amount that I have stored on my computer, it's like I have hundreds of songs that I haven't put out yet that I'm just kind of trying to see, what the right time or when the right vibe is,
I feel that. Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. Who would you love to, I'm going to change this one too. Who would you love to collaborate with who is not alive?
So many people. It's a tough question because there's so many people that I would love to do that with, but definitely I think I feel like a lot of the composers that were that have like unfortunately passed away at that time, I would have loved to be able to sit with and like exchange ideas and like pick their brains and discuss ideas with them. So people like Mohammad Abdul Wahab, who I really look up to as a composer, but also like definitely somebody like Farid as well. So I could sit and like pick his brain on like oud and like collaborate on ideas with him there because he was such a fantastic oud player. And also singers of the past, like I'm always looking for people who sing like more thought up style to like try to make some songs that have like a little bit more of that influence rather than just only coming from like the pop side maybe. But yeah, just some of those singers like were just so incredible, like Warde, so yeah, it's a really tough question for me because there's like everyone I want to collaborate with is pretty much like not here anymore. Yeah, but definitely I definitely would. There's a lot of people on the list. I'll just say that.
I'm going to change the next one too. The next one is I want to ask you, what did you most misunderstand about what it means to be a professional musician?
That's a good question. Sometimes I think I put like expectations, like unfair expectations on like my work or like how productive I should be, or like how much, I should have released by a certain amount of time. And then I think it's good to like remind yourself that that's not how really like creativity works a lot of times. And that's the reason. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. The problem with iPhone, it'll give you from 1,000 different ways, like that you need to turn off your phone. So it's definitely my bad. I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
Definitely just reminding yourself that like you don't have to put pressure on yourself like in an unnecessary way. Like I think I misunderstand like what even productivity would look like sometimes of just like putting out a bunch of songs that maybe I don't feel so connected to, but then like I have to take a step back and say like, no, that's not as important, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. My last question to you is if you could release release an album under a pen name where no one knew it was you, right? No repercussions, no judgment.
Right.
Like the classic example in my mind is Lupe Fiasco released like a punk album called Japanese under the name Japanese Cartoon, where he was singing in a British accent, and it was a punk rock album. If you could release any album that had nothing to do with your work, did not confuse your fans, did not confuse your label, did not confuse anyone, what would be the genre of that album?
I would definitely, I would like to put out like a lot of the beats that I have got made with like Oud, like a lot of hip hop beats and stuff like that that I feel is so off brand for me for some reason, you know. So I've not put out a lot of the stuff that I've made. And so maybe it would be just a collection of some of the beats I've done with Oud and stuff, different things. Yeah. Maybe also like I write like actual, like I'll write the melody lines for like you know, very like poppy songs or something like that. And I'll just like write them out on the Oud and stuff like that. So bringing like a singer on board and just doing something that's very like out of my vibe, but that I think will be fun to do.
Okay, so what you're telling me is there's like a Jay Dilla, Clarissa Bitar album coming, and then there's also like a Laura Marling, Clarissa Bitar album coming. That's what you're telling me.
Yes, I guess, yeah. Yeah, something like that.
Perfect. I'm expecting them in my inbox at some point. Okay, cool. So I want to open up for questions. We have one question in the chat so far. One of them is from Rafik. There's two questions. One said, how many notes on average are in a scale? And then the second question is, what tuning do you stay in most often? And the third one is, have you ever tried harmonizing with your voice using quartertones from the Oud? So the first one, how many notes are in a scale on average?
First one, yes. So in Arabic music, where there's 24 notes per octave, and usually the scales are like any octave, you know, 8 notes, like from the top to the bottom. But there are also extra notes. Then this is why it's not really like the word scale sometimes doesn't fully encompass what a maqam is, because a maqam is kind of more like a mode. And there's a lot of, you know, accidental notes and things that are also incorporated that might not be like fully considered part of the actual maqam that you'll hear. So there'll be those 8 notes in a maqam, for example, but of course there are those like extra ones that you have to learn per each maqam. If that's like a non-answer.
Yeah, that's perfect. So yeah. What tuning do you stay in most often? So for those of you who are listening, a standard like Western guitar is E, A, D, G, B, E, those 6 notes. What is a Oud standard tuning?
Oud standard tuning is, well, for standard Arabic tuning is from the lowest note, like the lowest pitch, C, F, A, D, G, C. So the C's are up on the octaves, the high and the low. And
which of the strings, which of the notes are doubled?
All of the notes except the low C, usually. The lowest C, like the deepest string, and the reason why they're doubled, is that it's an amplification device, because the instrument is very soft. It's just like inside the piano, there's 3 strings per note. It has 2, except for the last one, which is just a single because it's loud enough.
Cool. And so is that the tuning that you stay in?
Most times, yeah, unless I have to switch my tuning for a singer. Like, for example, if the maqam will be a little bit awkward based off that tuning and the singer wants it on a different pitch, then we'll adjust our tuning. But most of the time, yes.
Do you ever use capos? Is that a thing?
Oh, yeah. You know, it's funny. I've had to do that in a studio session once where they wanted me to do something like crazy high, and I used it. I used one. I get a little bit nervous to use it on some of my Ouds that are a little more delicate because I don't want to dent some of the wood, and I don't feel like it's as strong as a guitar. But for some of them, like I have one that's a little more sturdy. I've done it before and it works, you know, it works.
Okay. The last question is, have you ever tried harmonizing with your voice using quartertones from the Oud?
That's, it's definitely tough, I think, on the spot to do it. Like for me to think about harmonizing while I'm playing, because I'm usually used to staying on that note. So even like a lot of the singing in Arabic music, you're playing along the same melodic line. So to think of singing in a harmony, it probably requires some little brain work for me, but I haven't tried it, but it's an interesting idea. You know, probably I'll sit next time and try it. I'll see if I can do it.
Yeah. Okay. The last question is, in recording or live, do you ever use an electric Oud?
Oh, it's funny you asked. I literally just bought an electric Oud yesterday. from the store. So I have, it's right here actually.
Check it out.
Yeah, so it's super thin. This is like really common. You use an electric oud for, I'll show you, for like nightclubs, for certain gigs where you're going to be playing like with loud instruments.
This is the wedding jam. The
weddings, exactly. Like there's some spaces where the oud's just not like going to be heard. So you have this. So yeah, you have electric ouds, different sound, kind of like a different vibe. It's not really the same tone exactly, but for parties, for like loud events and for nightclub scene, like, yeah, you need this one.
Have you pushed it through any pedals?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I have a pedal on it right now.
Let's hear it through the pedal and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, right. It's cool.
Yeah, I love the reverb. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Clarissa, this was super fun, very informative. If anyone's listening and can't see the screen, you can find Clarissa on all the social media platforms. Just ClarisssaBitar. Clarissa, this was a really, really fun conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, everybody, enjoy your evening or day wherever you are, and we will see you on Saturday. We have an event, a community presentation event. There have 4 awesome presentations from folks all over the world on topics that they're curious about. And next week, we have 4 conversations during the week, so it's a very, very busy week, so check that out. I put the feedback link in the chat. And as always, thank you to the people who support us and make sure that make this work possible. If you're interested in supporting Africa, go to africa.com/support and help make this all possible. All right, Clarissa, thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.